Sarah Howe. I'd like to start by paying my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which I sit, in Nipaluna, Hobart, Lutruwita, Tasmania, and the elders, past and present, of the Muwinina people. I extend this respect to the traditional custodians and elders of the far-flung lands on which all participants and viewers meet today. There's only one prison facility in the whole state of Lutruwita, Tasmania, which has a population of about 500,000. There's approximately 650 inmates, about 50 of whom are women. I'll work across both men and women's prison, mainly in minimum and medium security levels. The education is not delivered by the prison itself, it's contracted out to a post-secondary education provider. TAFE stands for Technical and Further Education. It's like a mixture of vocational and community college. In many ways, the education offered by TAFE is the same in the prison as what we'll deliver on the outside. The qualifications are the same, so the official learning outcomes are identical. This is a really important aspect. Prisoners need to know that they're TAFE students, the same as students on the outside. This can be the start of an identity shift towards becoming a student and a learner. At least it provides a respite from prison life. One of the most satisfying comments that I'll get is from my students is that for those 2 hours they're in class, they can almost forget where they are and just be a TAFE student. However, as much as we try, this environment just is not normal. You can't just replicate outside TAFE. The first difference is access. Not everyone has the same access to education. I'm currently the only maths teacher in the prison, so I'm spread pretty thin. For this reason, I usually teach across all levels in the one class. So it's pretty common to have a situation like last year where I had one bloke learning to count on his fingers. There's a skill he just never had learnt. 2 students working on fractions, decimals and percentages, and 2 other students really struggling with pretty abstract notions of algebraic formula. The second difference is the nature of the environment itself. We've got interruptions like lockdowns, other things like court, and so many things going on for people that just means that students aren't in the headspace for class. And the third difference is high levels of complex trauma. So whether it's childhood trauma, adult lifelong trauma, systemic trauma, and indeed educational trauma. Just being in prison itself is a traumatic experience for most. Trauma has a huge impact on individuals and classroom dynamics. There's emotional and psychological effects, the physical effects of stress and hypervigilance, and all of these have direct impacts on executive function, cognition, and learning. Trauma negatively impacts the 4 main cognitive skills for learning: concentration, perception, memory, and logical thinking. So our students need more help with planning and organising.
Goodness sakes, how do I go back? There we go. Right. Okay, so yes, we're assuming people are experiencing trauma when they're in prison. If they're not experiencing trauma in prison, you really have to ask why, what their outside life's like. So trauma does have a huge impact on individuals and classroom dynamics. I think we spoke about this: emotional and psychological effects, the effects on cognition and learning. So trauma does negatively impact the 4 main cognitive skills we need for learning: concentration, perception, memory, and logical thinking. So this means our students are going to need more help with things like planning and organising, regulating their emotions and managing stress. We need to recognise that trauma affects trust, the ability to connect with teachers and each other in a classroom situation. The ability to sequence and make meaning. It affects decision-making, critical thinking, and problem-solving. So to deal with this, we aim to have a highly educated workforce in this area in our teaching staff through professional development and collegial sharing. I'll also try and teach students explicitly about the learning process, about their brain and body responses to stress and strategies for coping with or overcoming it. So this means I sometimes joke about maths class becoming an anger management program in disguise. So the rest of this, yeah, I got a thumbs up there. The rest of the presentation is going to explain some of the ways I incorporate this trauma-informed practice in my classes. So I'm not claiming there's anything new or groundbreaking here. These strategies will surely already be familiar to people that teach adults mathematics, but I'm hoping to show this through a trauma-informed lens. So I've put some, oh, hang on. Yep, so formal diagnostic tests. Oh, goodness me, we're having technology issues. Formal diagnostic testing is typical when students enroll in maths classes. However, I don't like doing this because it can really trigger people's maths anxiety and bad memories of schooling. So I like to ease people in with things like dice games, and that I'll observe closely. So 3 such games are Reads, which I've put a link to there. We'll try and work out how we get those links to people. So this game just involves adding 2 6-sided dice together. This is how I came to realize that one of my students didn't know how to add up, even counting on his fingers. There's a place value game in there, which is really good for getting a sense of students' numerical sense, and Contig, which is a bit more complicated. It uses combinations of the 4 basic operations, and I get to see people's maths processing and sequencing skills with this game. So learners that experience anxiety in education settings can be supported by providing structure to classes, which is really important in such an uncertain environment. This adds to people's feeling of safety and security. So I normally start with worksheets, just pages of sums, which is potentially the biggest departure from my mainstream teaching. But the reasons I do this are many. Firstly, repetition. The sums become known and predictable, which seems to be the educational equivalent of colouring in, which is something used in trauma, a mindfulness practice. I use different levels of these worksheets. So students really like this levelling up aspect. It's like a gamification approach. And there's no reading with just pages of sums, which is really vital in this environment where we really see low literacy levels. So people can work fairly independently with these. And they're self-paced, which gives latecomers time to straggle in, which I think everyone working in a prison environment is familiar with, people just coming in their own time, and then they can work at their own levels. So then we'll move on to some kind of numeracy application. It could be anything from atlas work, making different measurements of things, learning about space, which is really popular. And there's a lot of big numbers involved in that. And we analysed different rappers' vocabulary at one point because I really like to connect what we're doing to students' interests, and giving choice in their learning is so important. It gives students a sense of agency and control that's so often lacking in prisons. So I'll go into class with a lot of different activities on hand, puzzles and books and a variety of different worksheets. So another way to incorporate trauma-informed practice is just what I've been talking about, developing curriculum in consultation with students such that it's meaningful and relevant to them. This is a key to connecting with students and having them to connect with maths. And this is engaging in an ongoing conversation about their interests and needs. So sometimes this means connecting with students' dark funds of knowledge, which is a fantastic phrase I learned from Tatiana Harrison here, who'll be presenting next. Hello, I'm really hoping she goes into more detail about it because I've used enough time. But as a quick example, I'm talking about tapping into the wealth of pre-existing knowledge that our students have about things like measurements and money transactions related to the drug world. Now, we're not condoning any kind of illegal activities, but we do need to acknowledge our students and their skills, wherever they've come from. So in conclusion, I have found that steering learning through a trauma-informed lens can free up the learning process from a static power-based teaching paradigm to one that really empowers students. I've put my details there. There's a little bit of reading to further get information on the things that I've been talking about, trauma-informed practice, and happy for people to contact me at any point. Thank you.
I love